All right, welcome back to Bayou Time. We're having a discussion with Lafourche Parish President Charlotte Randolph, and she's given us the state of Lafourche Parish for our monthly update concerning Lafourche Parish. And before the break, we were talking about the procedure and the history of how the permitting process has come to fold in Lafourche Parish and really statewide in our region-wide in our area. And we'll continue along with that discussion, Ms. President. And that was, recently there's been a lot of talk and a lot of there's been a lot of media reports on the guy in charge of the planning and permitting committee, I guess it is, or I may be phrasing the title wrong, but I believe his name is Frank Morris, who was selected by yourself or appointed to head that up to make sure everybody was in compliance with these permits that we were talking about briefly. And it's arose to the level that some people are actually calling for him to be fired. And I know that's an issue that some residents may want to hear from their parish president on, so at this point in time, we'll just allow you the opportunity to comment on that whole issue.
Let me mention that the Home Rule Charter for Lafourche Parish allows the parish council to remove a department head with the supermajority of the council. 7 of the 9 members have to vote for the removal of the department head, which is what Frank Morris is. South Central Planning offered us an opportunity right after 2007, the implementation of Act 12, that we would do a regional effort for building codes. Sounded great to us. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to hire additional people. South Central would handle those issues, and we would simply forward the permit payments to them. Worked well initially. Unfortunately, the training that went on was mainly for the inspectors, not for the permit technicians in our office, who had been doing this process a certain way for a very long time. Eventually, the relationship didn't work. We had a 3-year contract, and we just didn't renew the contract. South Central felt that we were not enforcing the code strictly enough, and therefore filed some violations against some of the permit techs in our office. We went through that ordeal and finally decided to find the best and do it on our own. I think the fact that we did not have someone present in our office. Terrebonne Parish does have someone in the office as well as an association with South Central Planning. So you have the best of both worlds, okay? Lafourche did not. So we decided after this, when it was said that we were not doing enough, that we would go out and find the best, and we did. We found Frank Morris, who is someone who has educated others in the code for many years. Now we're being accused of doing too much. And welcome to my world, because naturally change is not something that people accept very readily. And the fact that these laws are so restrictive and so non-flexible, it's become a problem with some of the councilmen, because they feel that there should be some leeway, some flexibility, some latitude, and we haven't found any yet. If you're going to enforce a law, you enforce the law to the letter of the law, and no one has given us the latitude to do anything other than that. The councilman, I have not understood yet who is the author of the resolution to terminate Mr. Morris. It was not revealed in the newspaper article. I do understand, though, that it's on the agenda coming up next Tuesday. I'm disappointed. Certainly Mr. Morris, one of the first things he did was come in and sit with the ladies we have in our department and train them to be certified technicians in the department. 6 out of only 36 in the state of Louisiana Okay, so I think that's very impressive. I think he recognized that their vulnerability was their lack of knowledge of the code.
Okay.
And therefore, he thought it best to train them in the code. So they have been very, very dedicated to enforcing the code and to assisting the people in the parish in doing it in a way that benefits the residents and investors in the parish. I'm disappointed because there's 5 months left in this term. Department heads all come up for approval during the next term, which is in January. Removing Mr. Morris would certainly put the parish at a disadvantage because we would not have a certified building official on site. And it would be difficult to find someone who would be willing to come in and work for us for potentially 4.5, 5 months, and certainly to get to know the system and everything else involved. So I think this is a bit much. I think I'm disappointed because there have not been discussions held on this prior to it, particularly with some of the councilmen who have told me at public council meetings that they have many residents who have experienced problems with the department. But they've not been forthcoming. They've not provided us that information so that we could certainly look into it and assist where necessary. They've said it on a couple of occasions that they have a list of people, but they will not tell us who it is. So it's difficult to work that out. And it's easy to throw out a number, that I have 30 people who are complaining about it right now. A good example is we have a site at Port Fouchon, and this ties into to a well we had that was being drilled on land and cut off. When the people investing in the well and operating the well arrived on the scene, they put some mobile homes and some units on the ground, and we insisted that they be elevated. And they said, well, we're only here temporarily. People at Fouchon think also that they're here temporarily, and some of them have been here 3 and 4 years. So there's no actual definition of temporary, and FEMA doesn't accept the word temporary in any of their guidance.
Right.
This particular rig was successful, but we were persistent in that at least we needed some smoke alarms in these buildings, which did not exist, some safety measures. And while they were where they were eager to follow OSHA's rules, they were not eager to follow ours. Long story short, their temporary, which they told us was going to be between 30 and 45 days, has now exceeded 100 days where they're there. And FEMA generally doesn't look to hurricanes for disasters, always for disasters. We had a horrible flood in Lafourche in December. It had nothing to do with a hurricane or anything like that. It was just a massive amount of rain, a training that you can't prepare for because it was an aberration. So FEMA's looking for all these disasters, not just hurricanes coming in. And that's why their insistence is that you elevate whenever you come in.
Okay.
And so my point in that with Port Fouchon is that we have been very diligent in our enforcement at Port Fouchon too, simply because they're right on the coast. And the storm surges that go through there can wipe something out in a very short period of time. Breakaway walls, those types of things help to reduce the amount of damage that we can have. Elevation still is the best way to avoid all these problems. So we monitor all this, we make certain that the foundations are sound, We make certain that people adhere to the hurricane strap issues. And therefore, we feel more comfortable about what people are investing in Lafourche.
The complaints that are being made, at least in reading in the article, by some of the councilmen who were quoted, just by the reader myself, it seemed like the complaints were towards the particular person. I'd like to know from you, if you're gathering that the complaints that maybe the councilmen are receiving from their constituents are complaints at Mr. Morris in general, or are they complaints at the whole permitting process, which are guidelines, as you mentioned earlier, that Lafourche Parish government and Mr. Morris have to follow because they're set forth by state and federal law? What type of complaints are they?
Let me cite an example, or this is something that often happens, is that someone comes in and says, I'm going to add a carport to my home. Okay. So there's a very rough sketch of that carport. And so we go through the process, and the next part of the process is an inspection, okay? When the inspector gets there, they discover that not only has the homeowner added a carport, but they've added a cabana on the side of the carport adjacent to their pool, okay? So now we're talking about electricity, we're talking about plumbing, we're talking about a structure that needs to be secured, all right?
Okay.
So what happens is because people are not familiar with the code, and look, I mean, unless you're dealing in construction, you have no reason to be familiar with the code. You assume that either the contractor or brother-in-law know what you've got to do in order to pass that inspection. What happens, though, is if we don't detect something early enough, they call Entergy to have the electricity connected to it, and Entergy won't connect without a permit.
Okay.
Okay? So sometimes it reaches that level before they realize that they had to have had a permit earlier than what they did, or prior to all the construction that they did. The complaints are mainly coming from people. Another example I can give you is that we're setting up these RV parks in the parish, which are absolutely terrific. The people are coming to Lafourche to enjoy the scenery, to enjoy the parks, to fish, to do so many different things. But FEMA requires that any modular building, any type of mobile home that is here only temporarily, that it be able to be pulled by a pickup truck, not something that you have to load onto some sort of 18-wheeler or something like that. In other words, that it can be evacuated quickly, all right? And that it doesn't cause a lot of congestion by having it in traffic that is evacuating. These RV parks, however, there's some wonderful magazines out there that offer some terrific buildings that you can buy, and it arrives on site, but they don't meet the wind code. And if they don't meet the wind code, then they can't be permitted in Lafourche Parish. Same thing with Terrebonne. I mean, it's not like it's different here than it is in Lafourche. And so they'll make these purchases without inquiring about their ability to sustain the winds that are necessary. And they're useless.
And I guess, you know, you as parish president certainly feel for that person who's invested all this money.
That's right.
And so really what you want to do is just educate everybody before you make a big investment. Check with us, make sure we can get you the permit, you know, because we have some guidelines that we have to pass so that all of the residents in your community can benefit from discounts, and so we can make sure the insurance companies stay here to insure us all.
And we're having a difficult enough time right now with FEMA and the flood maps, okay, that we don't want to jeopardize any part of that We're going to have to make some concessions within the South Lafourche levee system, that there will have to be more elevation than we're comfortable with. But perhaps with those concessions, we'll be able to get the flood maps produced, and thus we can move forward, okay? So many factors play into this that, you know, while one person is concentrating on their particular situation, and we all do it, you know, we see our little world as this small microcosm. But what the agencies out there, those that unfortunately rule us, are seeing is the bigger picture.
Okay.
All of the people out there. Okay, and in order to continue with flood insurance, in order to be able to continue with federal funding for some projects we have in Lafourche, we have to remain in compliance.
With that, we're going to need to take another break, but we'll continue with our discussion with Lafourche Parish President Charlotte Randolph. Stay with us. We have more for you tonight here on Bayou Time.